and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where we dive deep into regional headlines and speak with leading policymakers and business leaders. I am Katie Jensen. On this episode of Frankly Speaking, we hear from renowned human rights advocate Dr Hala Al Tuwaijri and the first woman to lead the Human Rights Commission in Saudi Arabia. We ask about the progress she's witnessed firsthand during her time in office and confront the critiques levelled by Western nations that scrutinise the authenticity of Saudi Arabia's advancements in human rights. Plus, are there any lingering imperfections and mistakes within the system? And what are the proactive measures underway to address them head on? Dr Al Tuwaijri, thank you for joining us on Frankly Speaking. Now, you've been president of the Saudi Human Rights Commission for close to 2 years now. Of course, you've come from academia, but you've had several high-profile posts in the past. Frankly speaking, how did you feel taking on this huge responsibility, and what do you seek to accomplish?
Well, thank you very much. I would like to say that this task of handling the human rights file anywhere in the world is a huge responsibility, a humbling honor, and also it comes with a package of knowing you're doing good for the people and for mankind in general. So it has its own lofty values and principles as well. So in Saudi Arabia, that's no difference. I come to work every day knowing that, yes, I'm doing my job on the one hand, but also I know that this job includes the promotion and protection, the rights of people living in Saudi Arabia, and also contributing to the international community and the new trends and approaches to human rights. The task is not a simple one. It's not a straightforward one. It's not that you have a goal and you have to accomplish it at a certain period of time. No, it's ongoing, it's dynamic, and it's always changing, requires a lot of exposure, communication with others. And also you need to have a strategy to do all of that on the one hand, but at the same time you have to develop capabilities of dealing with sudden ad hoc issues and be very effective in how you deal with them.
Well, let's talk about some of the progress that has been made, because of course the United Nations held an important meeting in Geneva in January, the Universal Period Review. Now, whilst there you emphasise Saudi's determination to be able to achieve the highest global standards in not only promoting but protecting human rights. Now, of course, many countries, particularly Western nations, have accused this of merely a PR stunt. How do you respond to that kind of criticism?
Well, it wasn't really I who said that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is opting for the best standards in the promotion and protection of human rights. It is what the Kingdom has done in the period that the report covers that actually is a clear manifestation of that. So the report covers a period where there were on the ground more than 100 reforms, and those reforms are published, they are supported with evidence, with data, and that is an actual manifestation of the reforms. So yes, some people would always criticize, and some people would be cynical about what happens, but we keep open in terms of cooperation with states, government organizations, non-government organizations, about addressing these issues and discussing areas of improvement. And for people who doubt that it's a stunt or that we're not telling the truth, I invite them to come and visit the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and meet actually with men and women from the Saudi community and listen to how much they have actually benefited from all of these improvements movements and changes and developments that happened on the ground.
Okay, can you give us some specific examples? Because I think there's often a lot of focus on the lifting of the ban on women driving in Saudi that took place several years ago. But there's been other huge initiatives too. We've seen increased representation of women on a government and advisory level, incredible female leaders like Her Royal Highness Princess Rima bin Bandar Al Saud. Of course, she's the first female Saudi ambassador to the US, or people like Sarah Al Suhaimi, the first female chairperson of Tadawul, the stock exchange. We've seen special courts set up to handle domestic violence cases as well. So, Dr. In your opinion, where has the greatest progress been made over the past 8 years when the reforms first began?
Well, speaking of the examples you just gave, those are examples of women who made it to the top. So that's basically the tip of the iceberg. But actually, what has actually happened in Saudi Arabia is a huge transformation, especially when it comes to the issue of women empowerment. The approach was comprehensive. We basically expanded all the legal, civil, social rights and looked at legislation, procedures, and everything that was actually obtrusing women's progress was actually moved away. And probably these are great examples, I agree with you. But the biggest, I think, achievement is how women empowerment has changed the face of the country. Now you see women everywhere, working in every field. The pipelines for women to join the labor force were all unclogged, and therefore you see women joining the labor force. And this was translated in the data about women empowerment and especially women participation in the workforce. So yes, I think this is probably the most obvious transformation that changed the face of the country, but not to take away from others as well, especially the legislations and the revision of laws and bylaws and amendments that followed.
So certainly big changes have been made, but let's be frank, there's often criticisms too, whether it's freedom of speech or the death penalty. When there are different inaccuracies or misunderstandings in a number of NGO reports, how do you deal with them? Do you engage with them? And similarly, when they have a point, do you pass on the relevant shortcomings to the correct government bodies?
Well, in our mandate, we engage with all kinds of parties, whether it's state, government organizations or non-government organizations. But the basis of this kind of engagement is cooperation, dialogue, and constructive efforts. So we do engage with all of these entities, as long as the objective is to have a constructive dialogue that actually is on equal footage and at the same time understands the differences between us. This is basically how we function. Now, whether there are reports or there are no reports coming on certain issues, the Human Rights Commission is mandated to do its own monitoring and assessing of the status of human rights in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And of course, we do monitor what the media addresses in terms of human rights issues, and that includes everything. So it depends on our relationship with these entities. We engage directly in cooperation and dialogue, as I said. And if we find that the reports are not based on facts, but just meritless hearsay or so, then we just focus on working on the ground and trying to continue our strategy and reach our goals, and consider that as one of so many reports that are actually politicizing human rights and not really engaging in a cooperative manner.
But do you think that the perception of many international rights organisations is influenced by political bias and, frankly, unrealistic expectations?
Well, to start with what you mentioned as the comments we received in the UPR, or Universal Periodic Review, actually there were more than 135 comments given to the Saudi delegation in Geneva last January. And what was astonishing is that all 135 comments were introduced by acknowledgement of the improvement. And we looked at that as a positive presentation, although the time limitation was a constraint, and also the number of pages that we had to do that report in. However, it is obvious that compared to the previous report, there is great improvement that was acknowledged by the international community. Now, speaking of bias, I think bias is part of human nature as well. I think everybody is biased one way or the other. And for people to say that he or she is unbiased, I think is either a lie or that people are in denial. Because by nature, we are influenced by our environments, education, by even our identity and religion and culture and so on. So we understand that bias is part of human nature, but there are limits to how much bias can influence agencies or even methodologies by which countries are evaluated. So we understand bias, but we try to focus on what we can benefit from in these exchanges of information or of reports. Again, we're open to cooperate. We're open to look at best practices and experiences from different parts of the world, understanding where they come from. I would, easily say that, yes, unfortunately, there is bias, not only against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, but generally against people from this region. But we try to overlook the negative implications of that bias and try to see the good in these approaches or reports or criticism and see what we can take from it.
Now, you say the kingdom is open to change. So let's talk about what went on at the UPR with the United Nations a little bit more detailed. You spoke in Geneva of a lot of Saudis' work to combat violence against women and girls, including the amendment of the Law of Protection from Abuse on March the 9th, 2022. We spoke about the fact there's been the implementation of more than 50 reforms as well. Doctor, do you think that changing the laws is enough to meet global standards, or do people's mindsets need to change too?
Well, I think you need all of them. Domestic violence is a universal issue, and we've seen exponential increase, for example, in COVID-19, which is an example of how much this is really inherited in people's lives and values and all of that. So you definitely need the laws, because without the law you cannot function. You also need procedures and remedies. And with that, you need also to do a lot to raise awareness, to change the mindset of people. So you cannot focus on one area and ignore the others. You have to have more of a comprehensive approach to the issue of domestic violence. And statistics show that even in countries where domestic violence is an issue that has been under scrutiny for over 50 years, women tend not to report it. And actually, they tend to go back to the violent environment 7 times or more before they can actually walk away from it. So this tells you a lot about the depth of this issue. It's a very complicated one, but I would say that it's fundamental to have the laws and laws that have no gaps, and at the same time have parallel procedures and remedies and access to remedies. And with that comes the change of mindset and the awareness.
Okay, so awareness campaigns clearly in an important role in that. This is something the Kingdom has been doing to ensure that we can embrace that change at every level of society and really have an impact. Now, we mentioned some of the praise that Saudi had received in Geneva about Saudi's extensive efforts to improve women's rights. But Austria, on the other hand, recommended the abolition of the remaining privileges of male guardianship. This is something that's often talked a lot about in Saudi. Do you think that international recognition in this field has been commensurate with the progress that's been made?
Well, given the this particular situation of the UPR, as I said, it was very difficult to capture all the depth and breadth of what has happened in Saudi Arabia in, as I said, in a limited time. But for people who are interested in understanding really what has happened in Saudi Arabia since the launch of Vision 2030. I think that we are trying to provide that information, make it available. We also have an outreach campaigns where we talk to media, we talk to other countries, we welcome so many events and also host so many events. And the purpose is to make people see for themselves what is happening in Saudi Arabia, because the narrative is never complete actually without people witnessing it with their own eyes.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Vision 2030, because, of course, again, huge changes. We've seen Saudi, like many GCC countries, trying to diversify away from oil under Vision 2030. We're also seeing the Kingdom try and develop its tourism sector, expand the private sector. Tell me, you also say that it's really played an important role in enhancing the work environment in the Kingdom. It's made it more attractive and competitive based on a human rights approach. Can you give me some examples of how that has worked?
Well, the right to work is one that received, I think, most of the attention of the vision programs. And we always start with the laws. So new policies were introduced, one about safety and health of workers, one about prohibiting any kind of discrimination, but also the labor law itself was amended more than one time, and new articles were introduced and others were amended. The idea is to have a complete legislative system that actually protects the rights of workers in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We also have other supporting policies, laws and initiatives, like the one on human trafficking, for instance, which is basically focusing on the protection of workers from trafficking. And as you know, trafficking is a crime that crosses borders. So it's not enough for one country to have a very strict policy when it comes to trafficking, but it's more of an international effort and collaborative effort from all countries involved in the movement of workers from one country to the other. So with all of these legislations and policies, we also have initiatives. For example, the contractual relationship initiative that was issued by the Ministry of Human Resources and Social Development in terms of granting the labor rights to all workers in the coming to Saudi Arabia. So we know that Saudi Arabia is becoming a destination for workers from all around the world. And we know that when people come here, they basically look for two things. On the one hand, they look for the prosperity, the financial and prosperity of their lives. And also they look for a country that protects their rights. So that applies to Saudi Arabia in terms of the culture and the system. So anybody who calls Saudi Arabia home is protected in terms of their labor rights and all other rights as well.
Okay, so the economic advantages are obviously clear. Let's talk a little bit about the protection of human rights there, because in a recent interview with Fox News, the Saudi Crown Prince himself said there are mistakes that are being made. For example, if someone is arrested after issuing a tweet. But he also says that important judicial reforms are underway. So, Doctor, tell me, how involved is your commission in these judiciary reforms? What can you tell us about them? And when can we expect to see major progress taking place?
So yes, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince stated that, and I think it's a verbal affirmation of the big initiatives that are taking place in terms of the transformation in the judicial system. 3 laws have been issued recently, all of them controlling the lives of people in a positive way, where by controlling we mean there is more clarity in terms of the judiciary and predictability, of course. The fact that all of this is taking place while we are also progressing, putting forward initiatives, is more like fixing a plane while you're flying. And this is precisely what His Royal Highness the Crown Prince indicated. But at the same interview you've mentioned, he also showed so much respect for the judiciary. And I think every country that respects itself and its status has to also respect the judiciary. And therefore, the workshop that is working on the issuing of new laws or the amendment of existing laws, all are happening from a constitutional perspective and taking measures that follow all the procedures of amending the laws and the bylaws. Now, by a directive, the Human Rights Commission is a member in all of these committees. So the human rights lens is always applied when it comes to issuing a new law or reviewing one or giving advice on certain procedures. So we are there by a directive from the leadership of the kingdom to be present and to look for the commitments that Saudi Arabia has made to international conventions or the international community, and also the commitments of the local laws, like the basic law of governance indicates clearly that it respects human rights. So we have to make sure also that everything that's happening in this journey of the legal transformation is actually in alliance with the human rights commitment.
What are some other specific examples you can give us of the way that rights and regulations are changing? Because we have seen such an influx of expatriates and foreign workers relocating to Saudi. We spoke a little bit earlier about the economic advantages. You've also had major global companies like Deloitte who told Al Arabiya previously that they expect to see expatriate numbers grow significantly year on year. So what are some of the real changes when it comes to the rights and regulations that more expatriates are wanting to move there legally and for the right reasons?
Well, as I mentioned, when people move here, they look for a competent environment in the industry that they're interested in, and at the same time a protection of their rights in that country. So if they find that in any country, I think it will be welcoming for them and for their families and all of that. But if you take a broader look at how the kingdom is really opening up in many sectors and in many areas, and all of that is happening at the same time, I think it's becoming a very attractive destination for people who wish to take part in what's happening. And as I said, we're welcoming that. We're welcoming that in the sector or the area of companies and investments, but also in other areas like sports, investments, culture, arts, tourism, and so on.
And I want to ask you a little bit more about sports later, but first I wanted to touch on some of your comments that you made to Arab News back in 2022, saying that the kingdom had received a lot of global admiration for the way it dealt with undocumented residences during the coronavirus pandemic. So I have to ask, how do you ensure that the kingdom can deal with these undocumented residents with compassion, whilst also trying to make sure they don't unintentionally encourage more people to relocate there illegally?
Well, the pandemic was an exceptional case, an exceptional situation, and it resulted in exceptional measures. And therefore, we were putting away everything else and just dealing with humanity. And if someone gets sick or if someone catches a dangerous virus, then that is a priority over any other thing. So this is actually what happened. The government overlooked the fact that those people are illegally in the kingdom, and just provided them with care, medical care, vaccination, and any other measure that was necessary at that time. We look at that as an example of what is really the priority of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And I hope that doesn't happen again to the world. But it was a situation where humanity was placed first over anything else.
Okay, let's talk about some of those priorities, because sports has become hugely important to the kingdom these days. Of course, Saudis won the right to host the Asian Cup football in 2027. Lots of interest, the Men's World Cup in 2034. As well, there's been some serious investments in sport. Now, all of this has led to accusations of sports washing. Doctor, do you think that's a fair criticism, or is that something that you would rebut?
Well, if you allow me first to make a slight correction, Saudi Arabia has applied for hosting the World Cup 2034, but the decision has not been made yet. But we are interested in hosting it, of course. Now, when it comes to sports washing, I think this in itself is a very controversial term. On the one hand, it is a manifestation of how human rights can be politicized, because basically those people or agencies that are criticizing the kingdom and accusing it of sports washing are not taking the measures available through the Human Rights Council or the UN to actually address the situation of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia or any other country, but rather use these terms in the media to criticize and make people doubt the efforts of the kingdom, which are presented through official forums and are discussed. And as I said, we're open answering any questions or engaging with any delegation and addressing really in a constructive kind of dialogue the issues of human rights. The other problem I find with sports washing, and now it's sports washing, we don't know what's coming next. It might be investment washing or environmental washing. However, the problem I find in these terms is that it actually deprives the people of these countries that are categorized as sports washing from engaging, participating, and attending these events, depriving the people from actually taking part in sports, which by definition is supposed to be outside politics. So what about Saudi women who want to play tennis? So what about Saudi youth who are very passionate about football? Don't they deserve a right to witness, attend, and participate in these sporting events? I think that in itself is a human rights violation.
And in fact, we've interviewed the president of the Saudi Tennis Federation on this program. She had some incredible stories to share with us. And I will say, you've invited people several times during this interview to come and see the kingdom in person, to witness this change firsthand. And frankly, the opportunity of Saudi hosting these events will hopefully do exactly that, to encourage more people to come and see the kingdom and see what it's really right. And Doctor, if you will allow me to say, I think your appointment as president of the Saudi Human Rights Commission with the rank of minister back in September 2022 is proof in itself of the change that we've seen in Saudi, of Saudi accelerating this tremendous journey towards women's empowerment. So tell me, before we go, where do you see women heading and achieving by 2030?
Well, I would use the cliche of the sky is the limit. But after Rayana Barnawi went to space, I think that metaphor does not describe the ambition of Saudi women. I think that Saudi women have proved to be efficient and to be up to the positions that they've taken. You've mentioned ambassadors and heads of commissions and so on. But what I see in the community, in the youth, in the young, is actually a coming generation of very passionate, artistic, creative generation of women that I know will venture so many fields, and given the opportunities and all the reforms that have happened in the previous 8 years or so, and the parity of education, I think that we will see a great future for women all over the world, inshallah, but specifically in Saudi Arabia.
I think particularly with a trailblazing female leader like yourself, I have no doubt of that. Doctor, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for your openness on discussing these difficult topics at times, and we do appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.